Hello, this is Mr. Fisher, and today I'm going to be talking about hemophilia, which is a genetic disorder. First of all, what is hemophilia? It is a blood disease. The blood does not clot when it should. So sooner or later, every one of us is going to bleed. And when we bleed, we want the bleeding to eventually stop. But if you have hemophilia, this bleeding doesn't stop the way it should. So there are cuts to the skin, and then there are also deeper injuries called internal bleeding that are even harder to stop because you can't apply first aid direct pressure the same way you can to regular cuts. So bruises can become quite large. I didn't want to put any pictures of bleeding because I understand some people just don't like to see that sort of thing. Okay, so blood. Blood is a fairly complicated fluid. It's composed of three different types of cells. The first types of cells are called red blood cells. Red blood cells' job is to carry oxygen to all our other cells so that we can use energy. Next we have white blood cells, and in the picture they are white. And these are the soldier cells that fight germs, kill viruses, and so on. And the third type of cells are called platelets. And in the picture you can see platelets are much smaller than red blood cells. And platelets are involved in clotting. In addition to the three types of cells, blood is also composed of plasma. And plasma is the liquid part of the blood. So it's mostly water, but dissolved in that water are sugar and salt and various minerals. Also some hormones traveling around your body, fats, and then proteins. And these proteins include the clotting factors. And that helps your blood to clot. So, how does clotting work? When you're bleeding, that means that a blood vessel has been torn. These are arteries and veins and capillaries. They're the little tubes that carry your blood around your body. So, when you're bleeding, the clotting factors get together to form a mesh of protein fibers, kind of like a net, a fishing net, over the torn spot. And then the platelet cells work together with the clotting factors to turn what is liquid blood into a sort of a gel. And if you've ever bled, you've felt what this gel feels like as the bleeding slowly stops. And the idea is to create a physical blockage so that the blood will no longer flow out of the cut. When bleeding has stopped, then you have a successful clot. And this gel can sometimes harden to form a scab. So then there's hemophilia. And there are two different types of hemophilia that I'm going to discuss. Hemophilia A, which means that clotting factor 8 doesn't work, and hemophilia B, in which clotting factor 9 doesn't work. Turns out there are 13 different clotting factors, and they all have to work in order for clotting to happen the way it should. So each clotting factor is controlled by a single gene. Hemophilia A and hemophilia B are two different forms, but they're the most common. So when one of these genes develops a mutation, then the disease hemophilia is the result. Now, the genes for hemophilia are X-linked or sex-linked, and that means that they are on the X chromosome. Now, females have 2 copies of the X chromosome. We say that they are XX, and males only have 1 copy, so they are XY. There are some exceptions to this pattern, but this is the standard for the vast majority of people on the planet. Hemophilia is a recessive disorder, which means that the normal allele for healthy clotting is a capital H, a dominant allele, and the disease allele for hemophilia is recessive. We mark that as lowercase h. So there are 5 possible genotypes for hemophilia or normal clotting. For a female who's healthy, she has either 1 or 2 copies of the dominant allele. But if a female has hemophilia, she must have 2 copies of the recessive allele. So that would be X little h for a woman to have hemophilia. For males, it's simpler. There are only two possibilities. A healthy male has the dominant allele on his one X chromosome, and a hemophiliac has the recessive allele on his X chromosome. And we say that as X big HY or X little hy. Now, sex chromosomes are inherited like any other chromosomes are inherited. So each chromosome has two copies in our bodies, and we receive one copy from each of our parents. So when we produce sperm or egg cells, they have only one copy of each chromosome. So since a woman has two X's, it doesn't matter which X she's going to pass along, it's always going to be an X. But since men have an X and a Y, when they get split up into different sperm cells, the sperm will either have an X or a Y in it. So, if a man has the genotype XY, those two chromosomes will be separated into two different sperm, one carrying an X, the other carrying a Y. Since a female has two copies of the X chromosome, they get split up too, but both of those eggs will carry the X chromosome. When they combine, it produces either a female baby or a male baby, but it depends on what's in the sperm. The egg always has an X. The sperm either has an X from the father or a Y from the father, and that results in either a female baby or a male baby. Looking at it as a Punnett square, the mother is on top. She can pass down her X or her X. The father is on the side. He can pass down his X or his Y. And this is why there's a 50-50 chance of having a boy or a girl. You can see the girls are in the top row in pink, the boys are in the bottom row in blue. Now, adding hemophilia alleles to the mix looks like this. All right, here's an example. John has normal clotting blood. Therefore, John's genotype is X big HY. Joanna has normal clotting blood, but she carries one copy of the hemophilia allele. So her genotype is X big H, X little h. When they start a family, here's what happens. So there's John, he's on the side, and Joanna, she's on top. And the four white boxes are the four possibilities for their offspring. So the upper left offspring is a girl who's healthy. The upper right is a girl who's healthy but is a carrier. The lower left is a boy who's healthy, and the lower right is a boy with hemophilia. So there's a 25% chance, or a 1 in 4 chance, of having a child with hemophilia, because Joanna is a carrier of the hemophilia allele. Now in this case, if they have a child with hemophilia, it will always be a boy. Okay, now let's look at another example. Alan has hemophilia. Allie is a carrier, so she has one copy of the hemophilia allele. You can see her genotype is X big H, X little h. So there's Allie on top of the Punnett square, and there's Alan on the side of the Punnett square, and the four possibilities for their children are there. Upper left is a healthy girl who's a carrier. Upper right is a girl with hemophilia. The lower left is a healthy boy, and the lower right is a boy with hemophilia. So Alan and Allie have a 50% probability of having a child with hemophilia. So finally, how bad is hemophilia? Well, first of all, it's rare. About 1 in 10,000 people get it. And if you don't treat it, it's pretty bad. Essentially, untreated males do not live to adulthood. There are virtually no females with hemophilia. It's incredibly rare for girls. However, there have been treatments that have been available since 1985. There were actually treatments before that, but most of the people who had hemophilia and got blood transfusions before 1985, at least in the United States, wound up getting AIDS, and most of them have died of AIDS since then. Since 1985, there have been safe and effective treatments that involve blood products, And if it's treated, you can live a nice, long, healthy life, about 10 years less than someone who does not have it. It can either be treated only when you need it, or it can be treated preventively. And this tends to be more expensive, but you have less pain and less bleeding and less danger of bleeding to death. So the pain is usually in the joints. And the stress, well, I can only imagine the stress of worrying about bleeding to death. But you would need to carry those blood products with you if you were going to treat yourself only when you needed it. Anyway, that is an introduction to hemophilia. Hemophilia is a sex-linked disease. Thanks for your attention. Feel free to watch this again as many times as you need to get it.